Welcome to the Bioethics Babe podcast, where we examine the tough questions in human flourishing in light of science, faith, and culture. I'm your host, Darina Grosso-Agnew. Now let's dive in. What do you do when a doctor looks you in the eye and tells you there's no hope? Not this will be hard, not there are risks, but offers no hope. Every year, families hear a diagnosis like trisomy 18, often described as quote unquote incompatible with life, a phrase that sounds clinical but carries a devastating implication. But what if that's not the full story? What if the moment that feels like the end becomes the beginning of something entirely different? Today's guest knows that moment firsthand. When former U.S. Senator and presidential candidate Rick Santorum and his wife were told their daughter Bella likely wouldn't survive, they faced a decision that would test everything: their beliefs, their marriage, and their understanding of what makes life meaningful. Bella wasn't supposed to live, according to the doctors, but she did. And her life has transformed their family in ways no one could have predicted. So, what happens when reality doesn't match the prognosis? And how should we think about diagnoses labeled quote unquote incompatible with life? Senator Santorum, welcome to Bioethics Babe.
Thank you. It's good to be with you. It's a pleasure to be on your show, and thank you for the great work you're doing and telling the truth about what ethics are such an important part of all of these medical innovations and all of this all of the technology that's going on. It can't be an ethics-free zone, and I'm glad you're engaged in the battle.
Well, it's my honor to have you on and to share your story and Bella's story and hopefully inspire other families facing similar situations. So,
Thank you.
you've been a public advocate for life for many years. Was there a defining moment that made this deeply personal for you early on?
Yeah, there was. I came to the United States Senate after serving 2 terms in the House, and I was pro-life and supported traditional values, but I was hesitant to talk about it. It wasn't an issue that was really a core issue for me. I supported it, but like 99.9% of the people in the Congress, they'd rather not talk about it because they're hot button issues. It's very controversial. It gets you targeted by the left and by the media. So most politicians just stay away from it. And I was part of that group. I had two experiences, one that sort of led me down the path, the other one that confirmed and sort of hardwired me to that path. The first was just something that happens to a lot of people, which is a religious conversion. I'm a cradle Catholic, but was sort of I would argue, a lukewarm Catholic for a long, long time in my life. And actually, I really didn't practice very much for a period of time in my life. When I got married way back in 1990, my wife, who was sort of going through the same thing that I went, which was really not much of a practicing Catholic, once we decided to get married, we had a lot of conversations about what our marriage would be like, and we wanted it. We knew it was important from both of our families that we built on a solid foundation, which is God, and that we had some work to do. And so we went through the whole pre-Cana process and everything else. And that started us down the road and also the idea that we wanted to have children. We wanted to make sure our children were raised with the faith. So that started us down that road. And the big change for me was actually getting elected to the Senate 4 years later after we were married. I finally had a time in my life. I was a very ambitious guy, won a lot of races I wasn't supposed to win, got involved in a lot of things I wasn't supposed to be successful at. So we had this 6-year term, and it felt like, wow, I can, breathe again. I have time that I can think about things again instead of just sort of running every 2 years. And that sort of that combination of more interest and inquiry into my faith led me to two people that really helped transform me. One was the chaplain of the United States Senate, who is actually a Presbyterian minister, but a really incredible man of God who we had weekly Bible studies that I attended, and he was a great influence. And my local pastor here in where we moved when my family to Northern Virginia, to great diocese here in Northern Virginia, Arlington Diocese. And we ended up with a terrific church and a great priest named Father Jerome Fasano. And he really he really shocked me. I mean, he just spoke the truth so clearly, and his homilies his interaction with us was just excited me and woke me up to what the Catholic faith was really all about. And that transition began to happen, early in my Senate career. And it just so happened that at the same time that was going on, this big issue came up in the Senate called partial birth abortion. And it was the first time that the conservatives or Republicans or pro-lifers actually tried to fight back against the regime of Roe versus Wade. And the person who was supposed to carry that bill ended up dropping out of carrying it because he was up for a re-election in New Hampshire. And they were looking for someone who was willing to carry the debate on the floor of the Senate. And if you'd have asked me that a year before, I would have said, no way. But at that point, I just felt like, well, maybe God was leading me to this. And so I stepped forward, carried the debate on partial birth abortion. We didn't succeed, but we really made quite a splash in the debate and really caught the attention of the American public on this issue of killing a child in the process of being born who's a late term, fully formed, in most cases viable outside of the womb. And yet we were allowing this procedure to happen. And so that went on. And again, we failed. But 2 days afterwards, 2 days after that debate and that vote, Karen had a sonogram scheduled for our fourth child. And I remember saying on the floor of the Senate, because what the advocates of partial birth abortion said is that, yeah, we need to allow this late term procedure because sometimes parents find out late in pregnancy that the child they're expecting isn't what they were hoping for. In other words, the child had a disability or the child was maybe even going to die. And so they wanted the option of killing their child. I mean, it's just as simple as that. This was a child that almost in every case was wanted, but not wanted if the child was not perfect. And I mean, we had discussions and people saying that they wanted the child killed because they had a cleft palate or because they had some other minor deformity, they potentially were deaf or whatever the case may be. And so it was horrific. I mean, it was basically eugenics. And I said, my wife is scheduled for a sonogram in a couple of days, and I have no idea whether my child's going to be fine or not. But if we find out that my child got a bad diagnosis, and my child was, 6 months old as opposed to 6 months pregnant, would I kill my child because my child's sick? Of course not. Well, why would I kill my child in the womb because my child may have a problem? I mean, this is this artificial line that we draw. So I made that comment. And of course, 2 days later, we had the sonogram. And as you mentioned, the radiologist looked at us and said, your child has a fatal defect and is going to die. We had all my kids there. We thought this was going to be just a joyous thing. And it turned out to be a complete disaster. And we decided at that point, after we left the sonographer, we were both crying so much I had to pull the car over and sort of get my act together. And we decided we were going to do everything we could to fight for his life. And this was our son. We actually named him. We gave him a name, Gabriel Michael, after the great archangels. And we went about doing everything we could to try to save his life. We actually had intrauterine surgery done because he had a blockage in his urinary tract that was causing the problem that was going to lead to his death. And it worked until it didn't. And when it didn't, and in the sense that Karen, because of the surgery, got an infection, which is not uncommon. And as a result, we went into labor and delivered our child, little Gabriel, and he was born. I had miraculously alive. He lived for 2 hours. We were able to baptize him and hold him. And as I always say, he had a perfect life. His life knew only love because we held him and loved him for the 2 hours that he survived. And he was way too premature. He was only 21 weeks. And back then, even now, 21 weeks, but he was 21 weeks and had some problems. So it was not something we could save him, but we could love him. And it was was a horrible yet amazingly impactful experience in my life. Having said that, I was pretty upset about the whole thing and really was sort of angry at God because here I am going through this sort of religious reconversion, if you will, and stepping out and doing things that are not politically necessarily the smartest things for a politician to do, particularly in a state like I represented, Pennsylvania, which is the swing state, and at that time leading Democrat. And I thought, here's my reward. You take my son. I mean, that's not the way it's supposed to work. And so I was pretty upset about it. But again, thanks to these two great mentors of mine, it came, I just, they said, pray for understanding. And because God's got a plan here, and you've just got to be open to that and understand that, God can use everything for good. And the one thing that stuck with me was my priest, Father Mazzano, said, "What's your goal as a father when it comes to your children?" I said, "Well, I want to, they're healthy." So he said, "No, but what's your goal? What's the most important thing for you to do as a father?" And the answer, of course, is to shepherd your children to heaven, because that's forever. I mean, get a good job, great. I mean, if they have success on the football field, great. But the bottom line is, the most important thing is the thing that's the most important thing, which is life eternal with our Lord. And he said, well, I don't know how many children you're going to have, but you have one in heaven, so that's a win. And I know you don't look at it that way, because you're going to miss him and it's painful to lose him, but he's there in heaven and he'll be waiting for you. And it just sort of struck me that, that's, in the end, what matters is the end. And so that was a great lesson for me. And it shaped how I raised my children and how I dealt with other adversities that were to come.
Wow, that's so incredibly powerful, and it's such a witness to the world because you walked that path and you witnessed in that way. It wasn't just talk. You actually lived it and in such a powerful way, and you're absolutely right. That's what matters in the end in our Catholic faith. How did your early life and faith and family shape your convictions about human dignity?
That's a great question. I don't know that it necessarily did. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and it was a time where I think my parents were part of the greatest generation. My mom was almost 40 when she had me, and she was born in 1918. She and my dad both went through the Second World War. My dad was in the war. My mom was a nurse, and dealt with the problems back home. And with the Veterans Administration, she worked there, and they both ended up working at the VA. That's where they met after the war. And they were just from a generation where you didn't really talk that much about religion. It was more cultural. We were part of the Catholic culture, and it wasn't that you really discussed a lot of details. You went to mass, period. You went to Catholic school. You did, and they sort of entrusted the church to sort of instill the values and the teachings. And of course, by that time, Catholic schools had not really become that Catholic. As we know, most diocesan schools back then had sort of mailed it in, like we saw for a long time. And so it was around me, but I can't say that it really penetrated into me. I actually had a period of time I thought about becoming a priest, but really had nobody necessarily encouraging me or mentoring me or the like. It was a little bit of a barren wasteland. A lot of the priests that I met were not. They were very much the Jesus Christ superstar kinds of priests, and it was just a very, very secular time in the Catholic Church that I grew up in. Again, culturally very good, but not one that was doctrinally particularly sound. It really wasn't until I, sort of really met my wife, and through our courtship, her parents were very, very sound in their faith, and her father was a geneticist and was a pro-life geneticist, which there aren't many of those. And so it was really through that interaction that again I began the process of sort of the formation that was sort of missing for a long time.
Mhm. Before Bella and before Gabriel, too, how did you understand suffering, disability, or children with serious medical challenges?
Yeah, I have to say, I was around because we were raised on a veterans hospital grounds, and so I was around a lot of veterans, older, but my parents were in the medical field, and so and my dad was a psychologist, and so he worked. One of his volunteer activities was to work with the local ARC chapter, which is for children with disabilities, and so I was exposed to that early on. Understood, we used to call them retarded. And that was not a slur. That was just, what people with mental disabilities were called. It obviously it's become a slur since, but it was something I was aware of, familiar with. And because of my dad, I was somewhat comfortable with children who had disabilities and understanding the worth and value of them. But I can't say that it was something that I was I mean, I never got involved in anything that he got involved with. It was not an area that I particularly, um, you know, felt comfortable, working in or doing or even volunteering in. But it was something that I just sort of understood, but I had other interests.
Mm.
And but in the end, that understanding and that sensitivity obviously served me well later in life.
Mhm. Yeah. Did Bella change your pro life convictions or deepen them in a way that you didn't expect?
Yeah, well, Bella came along after I left the United States Senate. So, we had Gabriel, and then subsequent to that, we had four, one, two, three, four, yeah, three other children, and then left the Senate involuntarily, and in 2006. And we went through a really hard time between our son Patrick, who was born in 2001, and Bella, who was born in 2008. Karen had several miscarriages, and it was really, really hard. It was a very stressful time in our marriage because of my Senate career. Gotten in leadership and was taking much more of a national picture, and work was even more draining than it was before from the family. And then I ended up losing, which was a tough thing, probably tougher on my wife and kids than it was on me. And so she was just going through a lot of stress. And now 2 years later, or a year later, in 2007, we get pregnant again. And it was actually a sad time. I'll be honest with you. We were just, because we had lost five babies, and we were just thinking, oh, here's another one. And because, we were always open to life. Karen was at the time 47. So we just thought, wow, this is just another lost child that we're going to have to suffer through. And of course, they are devastating. Miscarriages are devastating. And particularly when you get pregnant and you feel like, well, you're going to lose your baby. And so there's almost no joy. So we continued to pray as we always have. And then we found out that she might have some issues as the pregnancy went on. And we weren't sure what they were. We don't do prenatal testing. We don't believe in it. But just by simple sonograms, you could see that there might be some abnormalities, but we didn't know what it was. And neither did the doctor. And so we were taking extra precautions with her. And when she was born, because she was low birth weight, not the things that she was delivered early for her own safety, because she wasn't gaining weight. And so they delivered her early. And 4 days later, we got the genetic test back that said she had trisomy 18. And the doctor basically said pretty much what the doctor said with respect to Gabriel. Your daughter in this case has a fatal defect and she's going to die. And it's just only a matter of time. And they started talking about hospice care if she's able to leave the NICU. And because she was born 5 weeks early, so she was in a NICU, but she was doing fine. And in fact, she did very well. She sailed it, and she left within 10 days. And I remember the first real argument we had, and sort of challenge we had with Bella, was she was born premature. So her lungs were not particularly well developed. And she had this disability, which is one of the hallmarks of disability is poor lung function. So she was on some oxygen occasionally when she was in the NICU. So we basically asked for a prescription for oxygen. And the doctor, that we asked looked at my wife and said, "You have to learn to let go." And I said, "Well, whoa, whoa, we're just asking for some oxygen here, buddy." And he said, "Well, she's not gonna, why prolong? I mean, it could be hard." And so we Mama Bear stepped up and just sort of, I won't say rhetorically slapped the doctor upside the head and say, "You're giving us the oxygen tank." And of course he did, but they sent us home on hospice. And she was all of 3.5 pounds. She wasn't a very big girl. And the hospice people came in, with equipment that was for adults. I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, most hospice obviously is not for little preemies. And so they had no capacity to care. And they sent us on prescriptions saying that she's probably going to die of lung issues. Because she's got this, trisomy 18, and she was premature, and she'll probably get a cold and that'll kill her. And so they said, so we're going to give you some medication to make sure she's not in any distress when she's dying. Basically, that's what they told us. And we said, okay, fine. and we're not going to deal with that. So we go in and see the pediatrician in a well baby visit when we get home, and the pediatrician says, "Well, do you have any prescriptions?" And they say, "Well, the only one they gave us was this." And he looks at it and goes like this. He puts his head back, and I said, "Well, why did you do that?" He said, "Well, this isn't a comforter. This is a lethal dose for her size."
Oof.
And so they basically were, a little, care and dying care is what it was. So we immediately got rid of that doctor. We got rid of hospice, and Karen said, we're gonna fight every day for this little girl. And I will tell you that, that obviously she was engaged in the battle, but I was not. I sort of came out of my experience with Gabriel with the message that I shared with you earlier, which is my job is to get my child to heaven. If she's not meant for this world, or Gabriel in his case was not meant for this world for very long, I'm now okay with that, because, being with God is a good thing. And so I loved her, but, I was not gonna, Karen was over the top, doing everything we could. And I was just, trying to understand, number one, we have 6 other children that we have to manage, and we've got to make sure that they're taken care of and that we have some stability in the home. So I sort of took that approach, which is, if you read the book that Karen and I did called Bella's Gift, um, will tell you that we had very different experiences through the raising of Bella in the early years, because she was going to fight for every breath, and I was basically saying God's will be done. And I think she was, I'd say there was positives in both and negatives in both. And the negative for me was I wasn't doing what I wasn't protecting my daughter and giving her, necessarily fighting for everything that she needed, because I sort of accepted the diagnosis. So I had sort of bought into, well, she was going to die, and no matter what we did. And Karen, I would argue, didn't accept that. She was the mama bear, but I think she struggled with the idea, well, that may be God's will. And she was not willing to accept God's will. And so I think it turned out to be a great combination at the time, but it led to a lot of friction. And I always say the book we wrote was a book about raising Bella, but it was really a marriage book about how two people can have very, very different views on things. In fact, we tried to sit down and write the book. They asked us to write the book together. After 1 hour session trying to write the book together, we realized we couldn't write the book together because we had two completely different experiences. And so we ended up writing the book together separately. And we had 18 chapters because of Trisomy 18. And I always say we divided the book evenly. She wrote 11 chapters, I wrote 7. And her chapters were twice as long as mine. So she had a lot more to say. But it was, I think, just tells you maybe how two people who have very different viewpoints on what to do could navigate our way through it. We had a stronger marriage as a result of that. And I think our kids witnessed that struggle and the foundation of faith and love as the foundation of our marriage that got it through it.
That's beautiful. So before we go more into the trisomy 18 and that diagnosis, tell me a little bit more about family life before Bella. So what was life like day to day? You shared a little bit about some of the sufferings you experienced, especially the 5 miscarriages, right? But in terms of just the activity in the family life, and even with a large and active family, what expectations did you have coming into that pregnancy?
So we decided, again, we went from sort of lukewarm to the, non-practicing Catholics that, we sort of got, it really got the spirit with us as our marriage came together, and we started having kids, coming to this parish with this great priest, and we just sort of caught on fire. Christ became the center of our life. Our faith became everything. The Catholic community that we had, we're really blessed to be. This church had a bunch of families who had lots of kids, and so we had that interaction with. Yeah, we were the small family. We had 9, 8, 10. I mean, there were just so many big families here, and it was just wonderful. And it was encouraging of each other, so again, what's important in life, which is faith and family. And so that led us to one of the families that we interacted with, which is the Hassan family. And Mary Hassan, whom you may know, wrote a book about homeschooling, and Karen saw, knew Mary and read the book and talked to Mary anyway. So Mary sort of convinced her that it would be a great thing for her to do. And it turned out, and I was very supportive because, I was in the Senate and I was traveling a lot and had a heavy work schedule. We were back and forth to the state because we'd have our family here, but we had a home in Pittsburgh. And so we'd be back and forth. And to put the kids in school would have nailed my family to one place, and it wouldn't have worked well for us as a family. And so I encouraged Karen. I said, this would probably be best for us. It fits for us. This was the mid 90s, and homeschooling was not much of a thing then. It was just nascent, and the laws in Pennsylvania were just horrific. I mean, they really penalized you for homeschooling and put all sorts of rules and regulations and restrictions. And so it was a little bit of a struggle to get to say yes, but she eventually said, well, take it. Yeah, we'll do it for 1 year for one kid, and who was our oldest. And so we did. And 1 year turned into forever because we still have a teenager at our house, Bella, that we homeschool, if you will. So we've been doing this year after year. It was the greatest blessing that we've had. Later on, as I became more and more aware of what the left was doing in our education system, I mean, there was no way possible we were ever going to send our kids to a public school. A and B, where there's no the Catholic schools that we were aware of, at least early on, were not anything we were particularly excited about going. So we understood. I always say that politically conservatives should be ascendant here because conservatives are having children and people on the left are not. So you would think that eventually we're going to outbreed them. The problem is they control the education system and they inculcate our children with their values, and the parents aren't smart enough to not protect their children from both the media, Hollywood, and the school system to destroy the moral imagination of their children and rewrite their. I was probably early on more aware of that than most. And so we really did everything we could to protect our children from the malign influences of the culture and the school system. And as a result, I mean, I guess you could say proof is in the pudding. Every one of our children are incredibly devout. I always say better Catholics than I am, and just wonderful, wonderful lovers of the Lord and lovers of the Catholic Church. And I'd like to say that we had something to do with it, but we also prayed a lot for those children and for their spouses to be, and turned out that everything has turned out great.
And that's the true success, as you mentioned
Amen.
earlier. So let's talk a little bit about the diagnosis. You mentioned that once Bella was born, they did some tests and found out that she had trisomy 18. While they were doing the scans before she was born, you knew that there might be something, but what did the doctors tell you at that moment?
So yeah, we knew there might be something, and trisomy 18 was one of the things the doctor thought it could be. Uh, but again, we weren't sure, weren't confirmed, and he didn't want to go out on a limb. And so after she was born, again, they said, we're going to do testing. We think it could be one of these trisomies. It could be something else. Um, but they mentioned trisomy 18, and I remember, of course, when they mention something, you go to the internet, as every parent does when you find out your child might have something. So I went to the internet, and it was horrible. I mean, it was they said, this is incompatible with life. These children, I think the statistic was 90% die at or before birth. Of the 10% that survive birth, 90% don't live to be a year, and so it's like a 1% survival rate at a year. And so I looked into it more. And one of the things that was a marker for trisomy 18 was the baby's hands. And I put it up here. So here's your hand, but if you have trisomy 18, your fingers are like that. So your index finger and your pinky sort of cross in behind the other two fingers. And that's a telltale sign of trisomy 18. So, of course, when Bella was born, one of the first things I did was to look at her hands, and she had the hands, and so the diagnosis, and I didn't say anything to Karen, and I didn't want to, let let just let I didn't want to make if it may have been it may have been other conditions that could have been the case. So I just sort of kept to myself, and obviously prayed even harder. Um, but as it turned out, Karen knew too. I didn't when they came to us and they said it's trisomy 18. It was devastating, but it was not like we didn't think that was possible.
Mhm.
Uh, and and we also looked up and we found that in Japan, for example, the survival rate is like 10 times what it is in America. And the reason is, we found out, is that Japan uh, actually aggressively treats children with disabilities much more aggressively than the people in the US. We have a much more utilitarian view of children than the Japanese do. And so we thought, well, okay, 1%'s pretty rough, but 10%'s not, that's not nothing. And so, she was sort of fixated on that if Bella got the proper care. And here's the other thing we had, which is she was doing fine. I mean, she didn't have any serious heart problems. She had some heart problems, but they eventually, over time, resolved themselves. But there are a lot of children with trisomy 18 who do not do well. I mean, who have very severe problems with kidneys or a whole variety of other things, and they end up in the NICU and they never come out of the NICU. Well, that was not Bella. And so we sort of said, Karen's feeling was, we could be in the 1% here. She could be, because every disease, every condition has a spectrum, as you know. I mean, they're all, you can be severe or you can be mild. All of it in the case of trisomy 18 is severe, but, less severe. And that's where Bella ended up on the trisomy spectrum. And so it gave us a fighting chance.
Mhm. When the doctors finally told you that she has trisomy 18, what was the language used to describe her condition, and how did that framing affect you?
Yeah, I mean, they were very clear. She has trisomy 18, she's going to die. I mean, that's what it is. She has a fatal condition. It's a condition incompatible with life. That's the thing that rang and still rings in my wife's ear to this day. That Bella is incompatible with life. And okay, let's say uh, you have a 1% chance. That's not incompatible. That's rare. I mean, I understand that, but we ended up coming to the conclusion that there are many in the medical profession who, when they see a child with intellectual and physical disabilities, they just don't see any point of it, right? They see this is not a child that's going to be useful. This is not a child that's going to be something that this is not a life we need to preserve. And that the child, and they believe this at some level, that the child is better off dead. And that because you're in for a life of suffering and frustration and the burden on the family and all these things. So it's not that these doctors are horrific. It's not Joseph Mengele here, but these are people who just have bought into the idea that someone's value is what they can do, not who they are. And that suffering is something to be avoided, not embraced. And so if your child is going to lead to pain and suffering and that not be useful from the economic point of view, that this child is better off, and you're better off without that child. That is the dominant, from everything I can see, the dominant point of view in the medical profession. And I unfortunately believe it is probably the dominant point of view within the country writ large. And what we recognize is that obviously what she does is not who she is, or doesn't really make her more or less valuable. That who she is, I mean, that she is a child of God, is all the value you can have. There's any more value than that. And so she may be able to do things that I can't do, or she may not be able to do anything other than be there and exist. I mean, at the basic level. And we're fortunate Bella's can do things. And the most important thing Bella can do, as we found out over the years, is Bella has a great superpower. She can love. And she has been the great teacher of love in our family. I mean, I remember shortly after bringing her home and looking at her in the crib and standing over her and just realizing, as I was just giving a treatment of some sort, I can't remember, it was probably a nebulizer treatment or something. And I said, this little girl will never do anything for me. I mean, she'll never bring me a bowl of soup when I'm sick, and she'll never do anything to sort of help me. And as I get older and she gets older, and that she is completely disabled. And I thought to myself, well, but she can love me, and she does love me. And I've experienced that love. And it just got to me to think, well, this is exactly how God sees me. In the eyes of God, I am completely disabled. I can do nothing for him that he can't do for himself. But the one thing I can do, and the only thing that he wants from me, is my love. And so again, I sort of walked away from that crib. Bella taught me another lesson about the important things in life.
That's so beautiful, and the right perspective of not only disabilities, but also of what God asks of us. And I
Yeah.
think that what you described there in terms of what the medical community, even what culture tells us about people in general, that if they're not useful, quote unquote, then they're not valuable. The podcast, my podcast exists because I want to show the dignity of every human person and the fact that it's because we exist that we have value, not because of what we can do, not
Amen.
because what we can offer anyone, but we give glory just for being. And I think that Bella gives glory just by existing. And what a beautiful testament that you and your family have shared with the world in this. So when you found out about Bella's condition, what were the immediate recommendations given to you about how to proceed? You said that they basically sent you home
Yeah.
on
Just wait for
hospice.
her to die. That was it. She's going to get a cold and she's going to die. And yeah, I hate to say this, they were almost right. We brought her home and she was doing great. And we fed her. She, it was hard keeping it. She was not the greatest little eater, but we were able to get enough nutrition into her. And, we decided early on that we would celebrate her birthday every week. So and our hope was that we would have as many week birthdays as our children would have years birthdays. And so that we would have, 80 or 90 weeks or whatever it is, birthdays. And she was doing really well. So after like three months, we decided, we're going to go to every month, not every week. We were feeling a little cocky, right? You were thinking like, this is going well. And she was doing really well. So we had little birthday parties, and we had a little sign up it was above the family room. And every week, and then every month we put another piece of paper with the 3 months, 4 months, whatever it was. And so we're cruising along. She was born in May, and until we got to October. And of course, cold and flu season starts coming in, and she got a cold. That was the first real challenge that we had, because she did get congested and she was really having trouble breathing. Because of her lung issues, we always kept Bella at night sleeping on a monitor to monitor her pulse ox. So when she got sick, we hooked the monitor up to her to make sure that her blood saturation levels would stay at 90 or above, which is sort of the safe range. And so we're monitoring her, and she starts to have trouble, and uh, so she ended up crashing. Her sats went down, and so we tried to do everything we could to get her oxygen and all that kind of stuff, but she basically stopped breathing, and couldn't get any oxygen, and her heart stopped. And so, obviously, right before then, we saw her crashing. We called 911 to come to the house. And Karen, who's a NICU nurse, immediately started doing CPR on her. And, she's only probably 6, 7 pounds. She's not very big. Um, and maybe a little bigger than that by then, but not, she was always very small. And so she's doing that until the EMTs get there and they take over. And basically, Karen saved her life, as the EMT said, and they get her to the hospital. Um, and that was probably the biggest, that was a changing moment for me in my experience with Bella, because again, I was sort of chill. There's a story that my daughter tells in the book, I tell in the book on myself. because Karen is always ordering through this time. She's doing well. So she starts ordering things for her later in life. So we're starting to buy stuff that she will need like 6 months from now or 3 months from now. With 7 kids and with a child with disability, I mean, we were living paycheck to paycheck, but she started ordering stuff, and she orders this crib, and Bella slept right next to our bed in a bassinet. She was really small because we had it on our monitor, and if something happened, we wanted to be right there. And she wasn't going to need a crib for at least another few months. But Karen orders a crib. And I wasn't happy about it. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't happy. And so, but anyway, she said, she wants us to build the crib. So my daughter Elizabeth and I, who's teenager at that point, so we get the crib, and I cut it open. I start tearing the box off. Elizabeth starts tearing the box off, and I said, "Whoa, what are you doing?" And she said, "Well, I'm opening the crib." I said, "Why are you tearing the box?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "In all likelihood, we're gonna have to send this crib back because we're not going to need it." And my beautiful, wonderful, faithful little girl, who wasn't a little girl then, just gave it to me and said, "You don't believe in her. You don't really love her. Because if you loved her, you'd believe in her." And she started crying, and it just sort of hit me that I had sort of moved on and emotionally. And I did it. I understand why I did it. I did it to protect myself because losing my son was the hardest thing that I ever had to do in my life. And I didn't want to do that again. And I just didn't want to emotionally commit. And it was shortly thereafter that she had this incident. And I remember like it was yesterday. So I go into the hospital. She's in the intensive care unit, and they're working on her, trying to get intubation and trying to do all this stuff so she can breathe. And she's this little thing on this gurney. And so I go in there while they're working on her, and she has her hands out to her sides like this. And I put my little pinky in her little hand, and she squeezes my hand. Mm. And at that moment, I just said a prayer to God. I said, if you get her through this, I'm all in. I'll commit. And I did. And that was that I did. I came to the recognition that I was sitting there just devastated, and that not loving her and not committing to her wouldn't make it any better. In fact, it would make it worse because then I would always regret not having given her my best. So that was, so the doctors are right. Codes could kill her, and actually almost did kill her. And a few months later, after just having recovered from this, she had the same situation happen again, got another cold. And in this case, unfortunately for her, I was with her at the time, and she just dropped precipitously. It was not like the last time it was slow. It was like all of a sudden she just stopped breathing. And so I yelled downstairs to Karen, who's the nurse, not me. I'm the politician. And so what do? I try to talk her into breathing. Like, come on, you're supposed to breathe. Come on, just breathe. And not really, sort of not dealing with the emergent situation as I could. But Karen comes in with the ambu bag and to help her breathe. And again, goes through the CPR, we call 911, and my kids are watching my wife working on my daughter. And it was intense. We got her to the hospital again, and I'll never forget this. My daughter, Sarah Maria, who was, let me see, by then she would have been 11. And she calls me, and we're waiting in the emergency room. And she calls me and to ask how Bella's doing. And I said, I think she's stable and she's going to be okay. And she goes, Dad, Mom saved Bella's life. I said, yeah, she did. And she goes, and Dad, you didn't do anything. And I said, yeah, that's pretty much the way things are in the Santorum family.
Did this happen often in her childhood? If she had a cold?
Yeah, she ended up in that situation. She was in the hospital for about 3 or 4 weeks and was on a ventilator for over 2 weeks. I mean, it was pretty bad. And so what happened was, we just figured that something was wrong, that she kept getting these severe react. She didn't deal with these things. And so anyway, long story short, we ended up doing some further genetic testing. We found out that she had an immune deficiency, and that was probably the reason she was not handling the infections very well or getting these infections. And so we started her on IG, immunoglobulin, to help boost her immune system. And since that time, she's only had one serious hospitalization for respiratory, and it turned out to be in 2012 in the middle of my presidential campaign. So there you go. That was those, and that's another story unto itself.
Mm. It sounds like you and Karen were perfectly positioned to care for Bella. Karen with her
Well, at least
NICU
Karen was.
experience, but you as well. And so it's amazing to see how God prepares us, right?
Yeah.
How did Bella reshape your family dynamic?
Uh, well, she became the center of the house. Whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, I was not sure at the beginning because everything sort of centered around Bella, and Karen in particular was just such a fighter for her. I mean, she obviously cared for other children, but her share of time just got devoted. Now, the kids were, many of the kids were older. I mean, this is 2008. So Elizabeth would have been 17. She was going to be going off to school. And some of and again, the three older kids would have been, 17, 15, and 13. So they got it and they understood it. But the younger ones, particularly Sarah, who was 11, I mentioned, and then we had a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. They probably bore the brunt of this more than everybody else. The sort of the lack of that kind of attention. We did at that point bring on someone to help with homeschooling full time because Karen just couldn't do it anymore. So we had someone to full time homeschool. The thing about that is she came in, she was a Christendom grad. And a daughter of a friend of good friends of ours came in and started helping with homeschooling. And I mean, she was doing it somewhat part time, but then she came in full time to help. And as it turned out, as the kids got older, she transitioned into being Bella's full time caregiver. So she now works 40 hours a week with us to care for Bella Monday through Friday during the day. And so she's been with us now a long time. But that, again, God placed with us somebody who was to help out a little bit with the kids' homeschooling, to eventually take over homeschooling, to eventually help care for Bella. And it's another great blessing in our lives.
Mm. And how did your other children respond to her when you brought her home and just throughout as Bella and your kids grew?
Yeah, I'd say they recognized. I think they were well formed enough to know, and particularly the older kids sort of led the way of you know recognizing her humanity and how special she was. And she was, if you ask any of the kids who's their favorite sibling, they'll all say Bella. And if you ask, the kids always joke about Karen and me. They say we know who your favorite child is, and it's okay. She's our favorite too. And so she just, and look, she never gives anybody a hard time. And we were very, very blessed. I mean, she is a wonderful, joyful, sweet, loving little girl. I mean, she just is. I mean, she can't walk, she can't talk. She is, completely disabled. But as I said before, she can love, and she you can talk to her and she'll listen. And I don't know whether she understands much of what we say. She probably understands something. And I mean, Bella is intellectually, according to the doctor, is a permanent 6-month old. So imagine a 6-month old who's, for 18 years of just, playing with the same toys and watching the same movies over. Her favorite movie is Frozen. We know that because she gets very excited every time that Frozen comes on. And so she has Frozen Fridays. We always watch Frozen on Friday. She gets to watch both of them. That's her treat. But she's, she likes music. She likes to be snuggled with. She likes people to talk to her and read to her. Again, how do you know? Because she can tell. She's just pleased. She's happy. She's content. Uh, and she likes to hear her name. So we always substitute her name for anybody in the story because she loves to hear her name. And so it's all those endorphins that come with helping those in need, right? I mean, and so you always feel good when you're hanging out with Bella because she just absorbs whatever you give her, and she reflects it back in her appreciation for the time you spend with her.
Wow, that's so
And so
beautiful.
so it's sort of, and look, and I know we are blessed because I know a lot of people, especially these kids, it's not, they don't have that. We have a lot of physical challenges with Bella, but the emotional side is actually, we're just so blessed. And and the kids just recognize the importance of that virtue of love and how powerful it can be.
Mhm. Who have your children become because of Bella?
Well, they become very close to each other. I mean, our kids are all their best friends. I mean, we have uh, we have 13 grandchildren, uh, one 12 and then one on the way, so we count 13. Um, and the oldest of those 13 grandchildren is 4, and so they're all a bunch of little rugrats running around, and they play together, they hang out together, they do things together. I mean, this family is incredibly close, and no one lives with no one. The farthest of the 5 children who are married and one who's not married, the farthest they live away from the home, our house, is 10 minutes. And they live well within, 5 or 10 minutes of each other. And so it's they wouldn't want it any other way. When one bought a house in a neighborhood here, the other 2 bought within less than a mile away. They just decided they wanted to, hang out together. And I have to believe that Bella is sort of the glue. She sort of kept everybody glued together and underscored the importance of those family relationships.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's very telling, right? A lot of people move far away from their families, and to
Yeah.
have family living close to each other and wanting to be close to each other
Yeah, I
is a
mean, we have after mass on Sundays, we have dinner at the house at 3 o'clock. We started doing it was later, but now that with kids, it's 3 o'clock, so they can get home and get the kids to bed. Um, and it's sort of, let us know if you're coming so we can have enough food, but no pressure. You don't have to come. Everybody comes, and every week, and it's we hang out, we say family rosary, we do a walk through the neighborhood, we play in the yard. I mean, it's just a wonderful time, and we just again feel incredibly blessed that everybody wants to hang out with everybody. And you know maybe that'll change with kids getting older, but we've had I think we went through it. Everybody in our family, including in-laws, have lived in our house and when married, except for one. So they've all sort of spent some time living here. We have one of our son and his wife and 2 soon to be 3 children live here. Before they lived here, they came here in December. Elizabeth, who you know, my oldest daughter, and her husband lived here for 4 years with their 3 kids, soon to be, eventually 3 kids. It's everybody, just this is the center. And we're getting to the age where people say, "Oh, it's time to downsize." We're actually thinking we have to actually put more space in because there's more kids coming and more things going on. So it's just and my dad was an Italian immigrant. We grew up in an Italian family. My mom was half Italian, but her grandfather, the Italian side, was an immigrant also. And multi-generational living is sort of how you do things. I mean, that was just sort of expected. That I always get a kick because, oh, we're in the sandwich generation. Well, prior to 100 years ago, every family in the world was a sandwich generation because you lived with your parents and you raised your children, and that's the way things worked. I mean, there was the idea that people lived cross continent and it lived independently. Before Social Security, parents couldn't afford to live independently. They had to be supported by their children. And you say, "Oh, that's terrible." No, it's beautiful. It's wonderful. It makes for family cohesion and makes for grandparents being intricately engaged in the lives of their children and grandchildren. It's a wonderful thing. It's a thing we're missing. And I'm a big advocate for having your kids live in your home and having and having that multi-generational experience, which is a beautiful experience for families.
I absolutely agree. We did the same thing. My parents moved to live with us here after my dad retired as well, and our son is so happy to see them every single day, and they're happy to see him.
Yeah.
And we agree that multi generational families and living is very full, a life full of
Awesome.
a lot of values and memories, right? And
Yeah.
I think that what our culture tells us is to be isolated, to be independent. And you mentioned Japanese culture; they're big into multi
Yeah.
generational families and living close together, etc. And I think it adds to life when you're able to share that with your family, and it makes everyone happier. Maybe it's not for
It works for us. Let's just put it that way.
yes, yes. Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges and daily realities of caring for Bella. What has been the hardest parts of caring for Bella over the years?
Well, we're going through one of those right now. Bella just had hip surgery. She had a very serious hip condition in both of her hips, and she had to have some pretty dramatic surgery. This would have been in April, yeah, early April is when the surgery was, and so it's been now about a month at this taping. She's incisions on both sides of her hips, on the side of her hips, rather large ones, and she's in a brace, a leg and torso brace, and so and Bella doesn't care for herself. She's still she's not continent, so we have to deal with the pain, and it's a tremendous amount of pain that she's dealing with. So we have pain control plus having to do the daily living care for her, and it's been tough, and it's because you want to minimize the pain for her, and you also want to minimize the drugs that she has to take. She has to take some because she has a lot of this again pretty radical surgery, and so that's and so she's on pain medicines throughout 24 hours a day, has been for the last month. And so, of course, you're up in the middle of the night giving pain medicine and caring for her. So, I mean, you might see some bags under my eyes. They're hard earned. So, we're not getting a lot of sleep here, but it's sort of the way you do it. And we go through that when anytime Bella gets sick. I mean, she's never had to be hospitalized except the one time back in 2012, but that doesn't mean it's an easy go. But we've understood because we've become we're the expert caregivers for Bella because we know her better than everybody else. And anytime she's ever in the hospital, I mean, they look to us to say, okay, because we know her, and they don't have a lot of trisomy 18 kids that they care for. And so, we have, if you went into her room, she has her own room, and it's a hospital room. I mean, it doesn't look like it because there's cabinets and everything. All the all the medical equipment is hidden behind, but she has a raft of medical equipment that we have to treat her, and we just make it look nice and make it look like a little girl's room. But behind this is all the stuff to deal with the respiratory things. All this has to deal with her GI issues. It's just the way it is, and so we get into a routine. We're blessed to have that help during the day, but we're on call at night, which is she's on a BiPAP machine, for example, and so we have to get that on. She won't put it on she won't put it on if she's awake. She tears it off. So we have to wait till she's asleep. And so that sometimes is late at night. So we have to wait up to get her BiPAP on. And it's just the normal flow of things. We don't really think much about it. Uh, we get to care for her, and we feel blessed to be able to do so, and we can't imagine life without her. We had to go through the process just the other day because her 18th birthday is coming up. We have to become her legal guardian. So we had to go to court and go before a judge to be named her guardian now that she's 18 years of age. And we were a little nervous about that process because Fairfax County, where we live in Northern Virginia, is not a friendly place to Rick Santorum. We've had some not pleasant experiences with the way the county treats us. And so we thought, well, here's another one. But I will say that it was a wonderful experience. The judge was terrific and knew about us. I guess there's plenty of stuff out there. I guess if he had this case and he had a United States former senator, he probably looked it up and he knew more. I was shocked. He knew as much about our experience with Bella as he did. And and was very, very kind. And I suspect he wasn't a Republican. So that just tells you that, again, this is Bella doing her magic, bringing people together who otherwise would not agree on anything. But I think he recognized her humanity because we recognized her humanity.
Mm.
And that's a beautiful thing.
And also so much work and time that you put into, helping her, bringing her to 18 years of age.
Yeah, I people say that, but I'll be honest. I mean, she, I mean, name a kid who isn't a lot of work. I mean, yeah, okay, we have to do a lot of physical things to care for Bella. Yes, physically demanding. And when you're getting to be, older as we are, I mean, those demands can be tough. But there's no emotional demands with Bella. I mean, I didn't have to go through the teenage years with Bella. I didn't have to go through marriage and courtship with all of our kids with Bella. I mean, there's a lot. Every child is work.
Mhm,
Every child is stress. Every child is you have to invest yourself into that child. And so the idea that, well, this is, oh, this is so much harder. In some levels, yes, and other levels, no. And just because your kids are married, it's not done. I mean, I still get calls and I still have to deal with, you know, issues that we're dealing with. And Bella has no issues. I mean, yeah, she's just great all the time. And we feel very blessed because of it.
that's a beautiful perspective, and also, even though children are work, they're worth it.
That's it. I mean, the blessing, you hear this from grandparents all the time, just the blessing of grandchildren and the joy of grandchildren. I mean, it's amazing what a enriching experience that is to go through a second round of shepherding little souls. And obviously you're a lot wiser now than you were then. And hopefully you can be, that grandparent that the child remembers for whatever values that grandparent can pass on that could be meaningful to them and the rest of their lives.
Mhm. So, when you were facing various medical decisions for Bella, whether it was the hospitalizations or uncertainty, what toll did that take on you emotionally, physically, on your marriage? I know you said in the beginning that you had a different perspective about how to look at Bella's situation than Karen, but that both of you had very valuable insights into it. But can you tell us more about internally what that was like, especially when you were facing some decisions about her health care?
Yeah, I mean it's stressful. First off, I tend to defer to Karen because she's the medical professional in the family. I certainly did early on. I think probably less so now because I think I'm a medical professional when it comes to Bella. But look, we're both very and type A personality kinds of folks. So we have some vibrant discussions about, how to do things and when to do things. But in the end, we like going through this surgery we just went through. I mean, as you can tell, that experience was really hard in the sense that we had to, agree to do some pretty dramatic things to solve her intense hip pain that she was having. In the end, we worked it out together and we had some challenging moments where Karen's her go-to is Bella should have no pain.
Mm.
And so she was really worried about the surgery, even though she was having pain and we were controlling it with drugs. But in the end, she was losing function and she couldn't do things that she could do before. And so Karen was like, well, but if we can just keep her without pain, then she doesn't have to go through the surgery. And so the idea of this surgery was just really weighing on her as we got close to it. And in the end, we went through with it. And now she's really, really happy she did. But, there were some tense moments because, she was, oh, we're going to cancel the surgery. And she's a little bit more emotional than I am, and she gets tied emotionally to Bella. And that's just not that's not how I operate. I'm much more reason, logic. And to me, it was pretty clear this is what needed to be done. So we have those. That's probably the biggest source of friction when it comes to Bella's care, which is Karen is obviously she understands the medical stuff well, but she's really fixated on making sure Bella's quality of life is just healthy, happy, happy, happy. That's really key for her. And I grew up in a family where my dad really didn't care if I was happy or not. So it was in a typical Italian family. Who cares if the kid's happy? Is he doing is he getting his schoolwork done? And so to me, happy's great, but happiness isn't everything. It's what's best for you. And so that tends to be a friction.
Mhm. So, in terms of, you talked about in the beginning about how you didn't have much support in choosing life for Bella, and even the support from the medical community once
Right.
she was born. As the years have passed, have there been moments where you felt isolated or unsupported, either by the medical community or family, friends,
Well, it's
strangers?
mostly insurance companies. I mean, so you fight with insurance companies. One of the things I didn't, I never put Bella's eligible for Medicaid, but we never put her on Medicaid because I didn't want to fight with Medicaid, and I didn't want, and we were capable. It was stressful at times and stretched us at times. We were financially capable to care for her, and it was only now that she's turning 18 that we decided that we needed to do that because we're getting older and we wanted to make sure that she was actually on Medicaid just in case something happened to us. And uh, as we get older. And so, but before that, we'd have to fight with our private insurance company all the time and about the care that she was eligible or the things that she needed. And so that was always a struggle. And candidly, Karen was the one who was the person doing the fighting. I was, sort of division of labor. Her labor was to sort of to sort of manage Bella's care. And I would come in as I did on occasion, to call somebody senior at the insurance company and sort of rattle their cage a little bit. But the day to day, the real struggle, as everybody knows who has anybody who has deals with someone with health issues, the insurance companies are not great, and we now have a pretty decent company, but the bottom line is it's always an area of struggle. We didn't access the school system. We didn't want her to be, and partially because she's immunocompromised, we didn't want her in a school setting. We didn't want her exposed to a bunch of kids. So we have to, all of her therapies, they come here, they come into the house. And so we have that we have to manage that. So I mean, it's just a lot of care management. Uh, but thankfully, Karen knows this stuff inside and out. We have someone, as I mentioned before, that can help her with that. Um, that as we get older now, lifting her. I mean, we have to because she's not ambulatory, so lifting her is becoming more and more of an issue. And so to me, Bella is a great thing for me because I have to stay in shape. I have to lift. I have to keep my strength up so I can continue because she weighs about 80 pounds. And so, deadlifting, if you will, 80 pounds and carrying her around and putting her in the right position and stuff. So, I have to stay somewhat physically fit, as does Karen to sort of manage those things.
Mhm. How do you navigate moments when you feel overwhelmed or when you felt overwhelmed, like it might be more than you can handle?
Um, yeah, you may ask Karen that question more than me. I, I keep coming back to, and obviously you can tell. I mean, I love Bella with everything, but um, I'm okay. I mean, I feel like uh, yeah, I feel like God's got this. I mean, there's just so many instances where the Lord is just, he's just made himself so known that he's he gave us Bella and he gave us her for at least now 18 years. And the incredible blessing that she's been to us and to our family and to so many others. I mean, I tell this story that this past Easter just happened. I was at church, and because of the surgery, Karen and I had to go to different masses because someone had to be home to care for her. And so I went to the vigil mass, and so I'm at the vigil mass, and just feeling just so blessed because the surgery went well, and the kids are great, and everything's going great, and I just feel so blessed. And so I'm went communion, I'm kneeling down, and I'm just in a really deep time of prayer, and I sat in the second row, so I got communion early, so I had all this time to be able to to uh, to talk to our Lord, and I, and I just felt like I was just really in a great place, in a zone, if you will. And so, and I said, okay, Lord, all these things are going great. What do you want me to do with all this? What do you want me to do? Talk to me. And so I'm, hoping the Lord, it never has. I mean, I've never heard the voice of the Lord, if you will. But I thought, well, maybe this is it. Maybe this is, it's Easter Sunday, and so I'm doing. And at the end, I don't hear anything. And so I thought, okay, that's fine. You've made yourself known to me more than I deserve. And so I finish, and so I'm after mass. I just sit for a few minutes and continue to sort of pray. And I heard this. I was at the right side of the pew, and on the far left side of the pew, I heard this noise, and I looked over, and there was this guy there, and I see him at mass every Sunday. We go to the same mass every Sunday at our church, and he and his wife and his little daughter, a cute little girl. She's probably 15, 16, and she has an older brother who's disabled, and he's nonverbal. I mean, he makes noises, but he's nonverbal. He can walk, but he's obviously has an intellectual disability. And I see his dad and his mom come in with him every Sunday. They bring him to church. He always looks really nice. Wears a coat and shirt. And his dad is, sort of holding him and guiding him because he can, be a little sometimes difficult. And I would look at him, and I just, I just always admired the way he dealt with his son. And anyway, so I look up, and there he is at the end of the pew, and he says, "Happy Easter." And I'd never talked to him. Uh, and, uh, and I said, "Happy Easter to you." I said, "I have to tell you," I said, I'm just blown away by how wonderful you are with your son. You just an incredible witness." And I said, "Just thank you for that." And he looked at me, and not missing a beat, and he says, "Well, you're my inspiration." And I just like hit me. Okay, God, you are talking to me, right? You told me what's important, right? Do I have to go out and, give speeches and do all these things? Is that what God wants me to do? Or does he want me to be an inspiration by doing what my vocation is?
Wow, what a beautiful story. And
Yeah,
it's like a ripple effect, right? When
it
someone
is.
sees the
It is.
love and the care you have for Bella, and he was doing the same for his son. And this is the kind of culture we want to build, right?
Yes. It's a beautiful culture.
And it's through the
It's a
actions. It's
loving, life affirming culture,
That's right. And it's through
not the culture of death.
not just talk, it's actually
Yeah.
living it. So what does an ordinary day look like for Bella?
Bella's a night owl. She goes to bed usually 12, 1 o'clock, sometimes later. Uh, and she likes to sleep in the morning. So, we get her up usually anywhere from 9 to 11, usually more 11 than 9, but sometimes she gets up early. Sometimes she goes, but she's definitely a night owl. Um, and, again, I'm not going to, now it's different because she's in a brace and she's really not doing everything. But, what we hope to get back to, because we've been through now 3 years, 3+ years of limited mobility and pain and trying to deal with these hip issues. But our hope is to get back to Bella loves to swim. It's her favorite thing in the world. You can put her in a pool and she would stay there for as long as you will keep her in the pool. I mean, she just loves it. So we do pool therapy. She would do it every day. We probably don't do it. We don't do it every day, but we'll do it 3, 4, 5 times a week when she's healthy. So we do that. She has a physical therapy that she comes in and does. One of the other things she really loved to do, we have a disability assisted tricycle, which she hasn't been able to do now for about 4 years because of her hips. She couldn't do the motion. So we hope to get back to that, which is another thing we like to do. She likes to take her tricycle through the neighborhood. Um, and then we have a playroom that she's in. And so she has all sorts of, like, a trampoline, little mini trampoline, and other things that the key with Bella, one of the things is to build up her bone density, because a lot of these kids, because they don't walk, have osteoporosis. She does not, but she has some bone density loss. So a lot of things that are weight bearing types of things, we put her on a stander, just again to get her standing, to get that weight bearing. So she has lots of activities that she does through the day. And when we feed her, she has to be fed through G tube. So she gets fed throughout the day. Every 3 hours she gets bolus feeds, and then she gets fed at night. And, just hygiene care, she gets a bath every other day, and she has a bath chair and set it up. And so, it's just physically a lot of things that we have to do. She takes nothing by mouth. She doesn't like to put anything in her mouth. So, other than she'll chew on something every now and then, just to sort of give her a little thing. But it's pretty routine, and she likes routine, and she likes, her favorite place is her room. She likes to be in her room. We do bring her out, we have family gatherings. We bring her down, but only for maybe an hour or so, because she gets a little overwhelmed by all the noise and all the people trying to touch her and grab her, and so she's she can get overstimulated, and so we have to be careful about that. We'd like to, we bring her to church, and she loves church because we sit in the back, and she loves the music. We go to the Latin mass with, the Latin cantors and everything. And she loves that. She listens to that. She likes to listen to music. So that's sort of the life of Bella.
Well, now that she's turning 18, she's approaching adulthood.
Yeah.
Did you ever imagine this day would come?
No, certainly at the beginning, no. But after we got into the regimen of getting her the support, the immunosupport that she needed to fight off these infections, she doesn't really have anything else that says, "Oh, hey, this is going to get you." I mean, she doesn't have a heart issue. She has obviously chronic lung disease, but again, we're able to manage all this. Really, for the past several years, we've been on the thing that, Bella's going to be with us for a long time. Now, a long time for trisomy 18 is different. I mean, because of her condition, her life expectancy is not. We've obviously greatly exceeded it, but yeah, I remember when I was running for the Senate, I mean, running for the presidency, I met a young woman in Oklahoma who was, I think, 36 or 37, and she was the oldest living trisomy 18.
Mm.
So we know at some point, her genetic makeup is going to cause problems. A lot of these kids get cancer. A lot of them have other types of disorders of organ function failure and things like that. So again, we don't know what to expect, but we're hopeful that she'll be with us as long as we're here.
Mm.
And we
Have
have
you
a plan if she survives this. I mean, the kids are all lined up. They're all very anxious and willing to take Bella into their home and care for her.
that's so beautiful. Have you ever had any more contact with the doctors who told
No.
you she wasn't going to survive?
No, but we've published a book, and we got it out to a lot of hospitals to make sure that people in the genetic medicine areas know that this is not what they say it is.
Mhm,
So hopefully, maybe they saw it.
mhm. What does Bella's turning 18 mean for your family?
Uh, I mean, we're gonna have a party and celebrate her life, but we celebrate Bella's life all the time. I mean, it's I I think everybody's sort of just locked in for the long term. That's the way we look at it. I mean, we're just uh, we're excited. We're excited that the impact she's going to have on our grandchildren, because they all want to come up and visit Bella, and they all go up there and see her, and they look at her, and because a lot of time, if it gets too hectic downstairs, we don't even bring her down, so we'll bring up individual grandchildren one at a time. Because with 13 grandchildren running around screaming, it can easily max out somebody. But again, we're looking forward uh, to the impact she's going to have on the next generation. Candidly, that's sort of what we're focused on right now.
Mm. Are there milestones, whether physical or however medically speaking, that you and Karen are hoping for Bella? Obviously, I remember you mentioned that in the beginning you were celebrating every week, every month.
Right.
What about now? What does that look like
No,
now?
I think again, we obviously we continue with all the therapies that she had, and hopefully that we her swimming, she's amazing. She holds her breath forever. I mean, which is always scares the living daylights out of us. But she, her development and maximizing the joys that she has in life is all we care about. And so, we don't really have any plans for Bella. We just want her to be with us and healthy and happy. That's it. Happy, healthy, and continue to be the blessing she is for everybody in the family.
Mm. Let's talk about resources and support because obviously there are families out there who may be going through the same thing or something similar. What resources were most helpful to you all early on?
Uh, People who had trisomy 18 kids, we really leaned on them heavily. And Karen and I both, Karen more than me, because she's really the expert. We talk to families all the time who get referred to us through connections who are dealing with children with trisomy 18. And we leaned on a couple of families, family in Minnesota and one in Michigan, who had older trisomy 18 kids, older as in, 3 or 4 years older. Uh, and they helped us. And the biggest key is to not accept what the doctors tell you, is to fight. And we learned this from Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, which is where we take Bella because they treat her as a person and they don't treat her as a diagnosis. And so treat the person, not the diagnosis. That's the key, which is, look, if you treat the person, if that person has multiple organ failures or other things, well, obviously that person, that little baby may not survive. And that's something that would be horrible, but something that you'd have to accept. But if you look at someone who presents like Bella, you shouldn't treat them the same that presents like somebody who has, who may only live for a few hours because there's really nothing you can do to help that person, help that little boy or girl. And that's where the medical community just sort of falls short. And so when you have a child that has, the ability to survive, then you need to treat that person. And when I say ability to survive, okay, they may need surgery or they may need this and they may need that. But if it was a child who didn't have trisomy 18 who had those conditions, would you treat them? If the answer is yes, well, then the answer is yes for a trisomy 18 child. And so so treat the patient. If you have a patient who has multiple organ failures and all sorts of other issues and you can't treat them, then you don't treat them. But if you have a child who has a condition and has some medical problems that are eminently treatable, treat them. And that's one of the things we have to, hope to educate, obviously with our book and obviously through the work that we do and talking to other families. I would just encourage anybody that has a child with a genetic disability to try to search out. There's disciplinary networks that can help you, but there's also I always found the best are parents who have gone through what you've gone through, and particularly if they have a child who's survived that they can help shepherd you through. And sometimes it's shepherding you through to, unfortunately, the death of your child, but in many cases, you can engage that fight and get the care your daughter or son needs.
Mm. And I was shocked when you said earlier that the doctors were giving you all trouble for wanting oxygen, which is basic care,
I
right?
know,
This is
I
basic
know.
care that you'd give to anybody. And why would you not give it to
And
Bella?
I guarantee you from our experience, we're not the first who've experienced something like that. And, we have Bella has some friends who are, also trisomy 18 who are still doing well, and we stay in touch with them. And this story is the same. It's always a fight. Yes, with insurance, but in most cases, it's a fight with the medical professionals, particularly hospital care, and when they're just born. And once you get older and you get out of the hospital and you can get your own doctors and you can find doctors who actually will treat your children with the dignity that you deserve, then things tend to get better.
Hmm. If you could build the ideal support system for families facing a similar diagnosis, what would that include?
Again, probably not the best person to answer this. Kara would probably be the best person, but first, again, I'd go back to making sure you have someone who's walked these shoes before you, because most in the medical profession have not. So you can't really get much advice from them. So you have to get advice from people who have done it, and contacting the trisomy organizations and finding people who can help walk this with you is really important. Finding a good physician. I mean, that's someone who's going to fight for your child. So your primary care physician, your pediatrician is really, really important. And you have to find someone who respects the dignity of your child's life. So that's absolutely key. And then finding other medical professionals that can help you as surrounded, because usually it's a team. It's not just the pediatrician. Usually your child has a variety of different issues. Again, finding that and finding a hospital. I mean, you say, well, what, any hospital? No, even children's hospitals. I mean, we had some horrible experiences at National Children's here in Washington. We'd never go back. Now, that's not to say National Children's is a terrible place. We just had a really bad experience there. And so you've got to go to places. It's building that medical team that is going to be able to care for your child and all the issues that your child's going to have, because they're going to have issues. Bella has a pulmonologist. She has a cardiologist. She has a GI surgeon. She has a immunologist. I mean, we have a whole team of people, and you got to make sure that they're all on the same page and they all understand the value of your daughter or your son. So building that medical team is really, really important to do. And then obviously you're going to need to the extent you can, you're going to need some help at home. And that help could come from siblings. It certainly did from us. In our case, we had older siblings, and they certainly helped care for Bella. We tried not to overdo it with them, because you have to be careful not to put too much on siblings, because given the attention that these children tend to pull from the family, having them have less attention and having to do this can be hard on that relationship. So you've got to monitor that pretty carefully, and make sure that you're not alienating children and creating friction between your children and their little brother or sister. And then obviously a prayer team. We had a prayer team that was just second to none. I mean, now I'm lucky because, I'm a public figure. And so we had a lot of people who were sort of following my life, and particularly after the presidential campaign, and prayed for us. But, go to your church. I mean, make sure your priest is engaged and involved. Make sure that there's announcements that, that your daughter or your son needs prayers, and that anyone, and, hopefully get a friend of yours at the church to set up a prayer team. So you need support. You need, hopefully relatives and friends who can provide meals early on. I mean, you need one of the things, and this is the hardest thing for my wife to do, because she is such a giver. She doesn't like to receive. She really hates to receive. She really does. She'll sign up for every meal train. She'll sign up for everything. And then when we're going through something, oh, no, we don't need anything. I mean, and that's just the way she is. And you have to have the humility to say, yes, I will accept your help. And Karen has gotten much, much better at that over the years. But initially, she really, really resisted it, because she thought it was a comment on her not being able to do it herself, and that she should be able to care for her daughter herself. And I think once she came to terms with the fact that that's impossible, and that you're actually not helping her by not taking help, then she got more comfortable with it. But you got to get comfortable with help.
Mhm. If a parent is sitting in a doctor's office right now, hearing the words trisomy 18 or trisomy 13, what would you say to them?
I would say it's a very serious diagnosis, and that, you know, the odds are not with you, but give your child a chance. Love your child. Give your daughter, usually girls usually do better than boys with trisomy 18. The trisomy 18 boys tend not to do as well. Uh, so I mean, look at just the reality that this child is like every child you have. This child's going to come into this world, and this child's going to leave this world. And your job is to get your child to heaven. And so try the best you can to care for your child in utero, make sure that they're given the best opportunity to survive birth. In our case, it was a C-section, because the trauma of going through a vaginal delivery is something that would have been devastating on Bella. And so give your child the best chance to survive through the birth process, and make sure you've got a medical team that will treat her as a person. And the odds are your child's not going to survive. That's just the truth. But the chance that you have to bring that child into the world and have welcome her into your family or him into your family, even if the child doesn't survive the birth process, or if they do, you're giving your child the best chance of survival. You treat that child like any other of your children or children to be, which is you do everything you can as a mom to give your child the best chance at life, and then let God work on the rest. So you're going to look, it's going to be hard. It's going to be painful. You're going to go through a lot, but every child is hard and is painful, and you're going to go through a lot. In this case, you may only go through a lot for a few hours or a few days or a few weeks or a few months, but you'll baptize that baby and that baby will be in heaven, and she'll be perfectly sitting there waiting for you when you come there.
Or she might survive and, it'll be a few years or
And
decades.
again, I try to be, Karen would sort of paint a more, I try to paint the realistic figure here, which is it's going to be hard, and the likelihood is not good. But there's also a chance it could be change your life. Either way, whether that child survives a long time and is a member of your family, or the child lives a few hours and is a member of your family. Because I've had both. And you know what? Both of them are still incredibly important members of our family. One who is a saint here on earth because she's incapable of sinning and has done amazing things. And then I look at my son Gabriel, who had that kind of defect and died shortly after after birth, but has had a huge impact on our family, had a huge impact on others. I can show you letter after letter because we told our story of, and you may not be able to tell your story to newspaper, but you'll tell your story to those in your church and around you, and you'll have an impact. That little child and that life will not go without having God done something to create huge blessings for those around you because of the way you welcomed your child into this world, and you accepted the cross, and you carried that cross with love. That's the key. That's what carries on. That's what makes a difference in the world. How long your child lives, for all of us we'd loved our child to live a long time. But the bottom line is it's what you do and your love for that child that matters. Nothing else.
Amen to that. What do you wish someone had told you in the first 24 hours of finding out?
I don't know if there's anything someone would have told me that would have made it better. I mean, you're just dealing with such a horrible diagnosis. And I guess the one thing is the thing I've already said, which is don't accept what they say as the truth, right? That don't accept the diagnosis because the diagnosis is a spectrum. Every diagnosis, every disease has a spectrum. Your child may be on unfortunately, the very bad part of that. If they were on the worst part, you probably wouldn't even know you're pregnant because a lot of these children die with miscarriages. But so your child's already on the better side of the spectrum if you're making it to birth. And so that means that they were strong enough and the genetic malformation was not severe enough that they couldn't survive the 40 weeks in utero. So there's always hope when you get to that point. And again, the thing I would say is just treat the person, not the diagnosis.
What's the biggest lie families are told in that moment?
Well, I mean, there's a series of lies that it's a fatal diagnosis, which of course it's not. Bella's living proof that it's not, and that there's nothing they can do. And that's also not true. There's always something they can do. The question is, you know, in the case of their child, does it make sense to do it? Is it good? And again, I come back to, if you have a child that didn't have trisomy 18, would you treat this child and would you provide this treatment? If the answer is yes, then that's what they should do for your child. That they shouldn't let the fact that they have intellectual disabilities, get into the way. And if that's the issue, now, if your child has a heart condition, but also has like 10 other conditions, and they were not trisomy 18, would you treat that child? They'd probably say no because of all the other complicating factors. And then they're treating your child like any other child. And that's what you need to demand.
It sounds like often in the medical system, there's disability discrimination going on.
Yes,
If you don't
100%.
offer the same care to a child who
100%.
doesn't have that disability,
Because
then
they're not useful. They're not, particularly trisomy 18, because, you have a Down syndrome kid, and that's another trisomy. It's trisomy 21. But Down syndrome, there's a spectrum also. Uh, but Down syndrome children, you know, uh, their cognitive ability can be near normal. Whereas kids with trisomy 18, they're not. I mean, they're profoundly mentally compromised. And so doctors know that. And so they know that with a Down syndrome, well, that child may end up being a productive member of society, whereas a trisomy 18 kid's not going to be. And so that's the bias that goes into all of these diagnoses that lead to non-treatment of these kids.
Mhm. How should we think about the terms like quote unquote quality of life or quote unquote incompatible with life?
Yeah, well, incompatible life is just a lie. I mean, show them a picture of Bella and say, this is not, obviously, incompatible means not compatible. So Bella is compatible with life and many others who survive. Again, survival rates are not zero. And in other countries where they do a more aggressive treatment, they're higher than 1%. So incompatible with life is just simply a lie. Number two, quality of life. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people who are born and have a lousy quality of life and they have no health issues whatsoever, right? So because they're, and they end up in drug gangs and they kill people, that's pretty bad quality of life. So we're going to sort those people out early on. The idea of quality of life is crazy. The quality of life is a term to be able to not treat people who they don't want to treat because they're disabled. The bottom line is Bella has a tremendous quality of life. But if you would talk to most people, would say, well, what she can't do this, she can't do that. Yeah, but she has a great quality of life. She's a happy, healthy, wonderful little girl. And no, she can't do 99% of what most people can do. That doesn't mean her quality of life isn't good.
It sounds like her quality of life is beautiful.
It's
She's surrounded
perfect.
by family and
Yeah.
love and activities and care.
And she increased the quality of life of everybody around it. So there.
Yes. Yes. No, I think that quality of life as a term is very problematic because it assumes that that doctor or that healthcare professional knows better what's better for your
Right.
child or someone else's life based on a, I would say, a projection.
It's also
And
a utilitarian projection. It's based upon what they can do as opposed to who they are.
Mhm. Yes. What has Bella taught you about how we measure the value of a human life?
Uh, well, I mean, when we wrote the book, we did 18 chapters, and every chapter began with love is. So we found that Bella was a great teacher of love, that God used her as a vessel for us to understand what all the different aspects of love and um, how we can better love Him by learning to better love her. And so we always say Bella's our teacher, and so we and look at all the things we have to do for her and all the things she does for us, and just feel, like I said, we just feel very, very blessed to have the opportunity to learn from her.
Hmm. If Bella could express in words what her life means, what do you think she would want people to understand?
Um, I, it's hard for me to say. I mean, she's she's a she's just, I mean, she's a little baby, and intellectually she's just this little baby who wants to be held, who wants to be talked to, who wants to be listened to. And yet, how many people in their 70s want to be held, want to be talked to, want to be listened to? I mean, she wants the things we all want. It's just a little different. In her case, she wants to be seen. She wants to be heard. She wants to be loved. She wants to be touched. Again, all the things that we do to care for Bella, if we think about that, those are sort of the basic needs of all of us. And sometimes we forget that.
Mhm. And finally, has Bella's life changed how you think about what it means to be fully human?
Wow. Yeah, I would just say that Bella's life is she has the divine spark. I mean, we pray at night. We say prayers with her at night. We give her a blessing. We say prayers. And, I'll talk to her. We talk to her throughout the day and but when we say prayers, she like lights up. She gets it. And we go to church. I mean, she gets it. And you'd say, how does she get it? I mean, she doesn't understand that. Yeah, at some level she does. I do believe there is that divine spark, even in those who are intellectually challenged, because they're a creature of God and God knows them and she knows God. And so I think at the most base level, it's in there. There's that, everyone said there's a God-sized hole in all of our hearts. And I think that just the fact that we're created by him for him. We know that. And Bella shows that.
That is so incredibly beautiful, and you and your family are an inspiration to us, and I hope that people who are listening to this will also understand just the beauty and meaning of life just through what you've expressed and what you witnessed with your life. So thank you so much, Senator Santorum, for sharing Bella's story and for being such a beautiful witness.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I love talking about my daughter, and so I appreciate the platform to do it. God bless you.
God bless you. For my conversation with former U.S. Senator and presidential candidate Rick Santorum, co author with his wife Karen of Bella's Gift: How One Little Girl Transformed Our Family and Inspired a Nation. Here are my 5 key takeaways on what happens when a trisomy 18 diagnosis meets a family who refuses to accept the limits placed on a life. 1. A diagnosis is not a destiny. Bella's trisomy 18 diagnosis was described as quote unquote incompatible with life, with doctors expecting her to die. And yet she lived and continues to live. Her story exposes a critical gap between medical prognosis and lived reality, reminding us that statistics are not certainties. 2. The greatest pressure often comes from framing, not facts. The language used, quote unquote fatal, quote unquote no hope, quote unquote incompatible with life, shaped expectations from the very beginning. What the Santorums experienced wasn't just a diagnosis, but a common, prejudiced narrative about what Bella's life was worth. 3. Bella's existence, not ability, defines the value of her life. Bella cannot walk or speak, and doctors assessed her life in terms of limitation. Yet her value does not come from what she can do, but from who she is. 4. Suffering can divide or deepen a family. Bella's condition didn't just bring medical challenges, it created real tension in how her parents approached her care. One leaned toward acceptance, the other toward fighting for every moment. That tension didn't break them. It ultimately strengthened their marriage and unified their family. 5. One life can ripple far beyond the family. Bella didn't just change her immediate family, she became a witness to others, inspiring people facing similar situations and even strangers navigating their own challenges. Her life illustrates that human dignity isn't theoretical, it's something that exists in each one of us. Because truth matters and human dignity isn't optional. This is Bioethics Babe. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Bioethics Babe podcast. If you've enjoyed this content, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and your favorite podcast platform, and share with your friends and family. Also check out bioethicsbabe.com for the latest episodes and resources.